Star Shines, I'm Sylvia-Moonbeam, and today I'm going to be doing another Dechtech video. I know I said I'd be doing a Pokemon video fairly soon, and I promise that will be coming out soon. I'm just kind of motivated to do Magic content right now. For the next video or two, you'll have to put up with a couple decks, but I promise we'll be going back to all the Transformers and Pokemon and all the fun stuff you signed up for. Today's deck is a 60 card modern deck, and as a piece of housekeeping, I want to make a correction from my previous video. All of my decks are modern, not standard. I don't have the money for standard. I accidentally got that flip-flopped. To be honest, modern and standard are they're so synonymous that it's so easy to get them flopped. But we'll be looking at a modern 60 card deck that I like to call Essence of the Night Pack. Let's dig in. Welcome back to my playmat. Starting off like we did last time, we're going to be covering lands first. For this 60 card deck, we're going to be using 20 lands, 1/3. Our only basic lands are going to be forests, and I personally am using 2 artworks from Shadows over Innistrad. Once you see kind of the theming of the deck, why I chose Innistrad lands will make more sense. I didn't have enough of the same artwork to do all one. However, I did choose 2 forests from the same set, so at least even though we have 2 different artworks, it is thematic. For other lands, we're using 4 copies of Selesnya Guildgate. I am personally using the version from the latest Ravnica block. If you want to use a different version of Selesnya Guildgate, that's perfectly fine. This is also our predominant source of white mana. We do have other ways to get white mana, but chances are, if you're going to be using any of the white in this deck, it's going to be from one of our guild gates. That being said, as you have probably figured out, this deck is green with white splash. Along with the Innistrad theming, we have 1 Planeswalker, Arlen, Voice of the Pack, from War of the Spark. For 6 mana, she starts off with 7 loyalty, and she has a really cool passive effect. Each creature you control that's a wolf or a werewolf enters the battlefield with an additional 1/1 counter on it. As this card can probably suggest to you, we're going to be making a lot of wolves, and this card will allow our wolves to become 3/3s instead of 2/2s. If you desire, you can also use her -2 ability to just create a green wolf creature token. However, we have other ways of getting wolves, so you may not need this. I guess from a green deck, we do have predominantly creatures in this deck. Starting off, we have 4 copies of Elvish Mystic, a 1/1 elf druid for 1, that when we tap it will give us 1 green mana. Next up, we have 4 copies of Essence Warden, another 1/1 elf for 1. Whenever another creature comes out onto play, both on your side of the field and your opponent's, you gain 1 life. This also stacks, so if you have all 4 of these lovely ladies out, and you gain 1 creature, you heal 4. As you will see later on in this video, even having just 1 or 2 of these Essence Wardens out at any given time can add up to some really big healing. Next, we have 4 copies of Deadly Recluse. For 2 mana, we're getting a 1/2 spider creature that has Reach and Death Touch. This will help add some defensive barrier to protect your weaker creatures, as your opponent may not want to wipe out their best creature or 2 by swinging at a spider. This is also the only creature in the deck that has Reach, so can be really useful against flying heavy decks. Next up, we have 4 copies of Watchwolf, a 3/3 wolf creature for 1 green and 1 white. Watchwolf was originally Colonian Tusker, a 3/3 beast for 2 green. However, that was swapped out with this wolf, both because it goes with the theming and because it synergizes better. However, if you would prefer to have Colonian Tuskers, just because it's a little bit easier to get out, go for it. You do have other ways of making white mana, as you'll see in a moment, so Watch Wolf shouldn't be too difficult to get out. Speaking of which, we have 3 copies of Paradise Druid, a 2/1 Elf Druid for 2. When she is untapped, she has hexproof, and you can tap her to add 1 mana of any color, being, in this case, green, white, or colorless. This is your main way of getting white mana outside of your guild gates, so I would strongly recommend trying to keep these lovely ladies alive as long as you can until you're able to get at least 1 or 2 guild gates out. In case you're wondering why we only run 3 Paradise Druids, I run, instead of a 4th copy, a single copy of Nylia's Disciple. When she enters the battlefield, we'll gain life equal to our devotion to green, while a 3/3 archer for 4 isn't very mana efficient. This ability can be really useful. There are only 2 cards in this deck that do not have green mana in their converted mana cost, meaning pretty much every permanent on our field will be giving us some devotion. You can stack up a ton of healing just by playing this card on the field. However, if you want, you can swap it out with an extra copy of Paradise Druid if you'd rather have a little bit more stable mana source. Next up, we're running 2 copies of Tulsimir, Friend of Wolves. For 5 mana, we get a 3/3 Elf Scout, and when he enters the battlefield, we get to create a Volja, Friend of Elves, legendary 3/3 green and white wolf creature token. Essentially, when he comes in, we get an extra Watch Wolf. Whenever any wolf enters the battlefield under our control, we gain 3 life, and that creature fights another target creature that we don't control, basically getting a free bear punch when we get any wolf. Technically the last of our creatures, we have Essence of the Wild, a 6/6 avatar for 6. While this card is on the field, it has the passive effect that other creatures that enter the battlefield under our control enter as a copy of Essence the Wild, meaning that even something like a token instead becomes a copy. Normally tokens don't have devotion, but because they turn into a copy of Essence the Wild, they do gain that devotion. We also include 4 copies just to make getting this card out easier, because this card can be one of our win cons, instantly turning any of our 2/2 wolves into 6/6 avatars. For our instants and sorceries, first up we have Predator's Rapport. When we play this 3-cost instant, we get to choose a target creature we control and gain life equal to that creature's power plus their toughness. Remember, the Essence of the Wild is a 6/6, so if we have at least 1 Essence of the Wild out while Predator's Rapport is played, we'll be able to gain 12 health. Also, we're including a copy of Aspect of Hydra, which will net us XX on a single creature until end of turn, where X is our devotion to green. Again, we have a lot of devotion to green, so we're going to be able to rack up some huge power using Aspect of Hydra, and if you're willing to pay just a little bit more mana, Predator's Rapport will give you an even bigger heal. If Aspect of Hydra isn't your style, you can always swap it out for a 4th copy of Bond of Flourishing. This is a sorcery that allows us to look at the top 3 cards of our library. We may reveal a permanent card from among them and put it into our hand. The rest of the cards go on the bottom of our library in the order of our choosing, and we gain 3 life. Again, another way of gaining life. And considering you only have to pay 2 mana for this fetch with a little bit of healing, it makes for a pretty good card. Honestly, the only reason I have 3 copies in this deck is because I only have 3. If I had a 4th copy, I would swap it out for Aspect of Hydra. Next up, we have a single copy of Triumph of the Hordes. This is a 4-cost sorcery that until end of turn, all of our creatures get 1/1 and trample, which alone is a good enough effect, but it also gains infect. Infect is kind of an old mechanic where creatures deal damage in the form of -1, -1 counters, meaning even if you don't kill a creature, you will permanently cripple it. If you deal any damage to your opponent directly, they'll take a poison counter, and regardless of their life total, if they get 10 poison counters, your opponent loses the game. The last of our sorceries is Howl of the Night Pack, a 7-cost sorcery that puts a 2/2 green wolf creature token onto the battlefield for each forest we control. Remember, this deck uses only forests for its basic lands, and while 7 mana may seem steep, remember that we do have those Elvish Mystics and Paradise Druids to help us get that mana faster. I find that the first time I use Howl of the Night Pack in a game, I'm often able to get 4 or 5 wolves, which does seem pretty fair given what we're paying for it. And as you go longer and longer into the game, you'll only get more and more wolves. Remember that we do have 18 forests, so paying 7 mana in order to get 18 2/2 wolves, or if you have Arlen out, 3/3 wolves, or if we have a Essence of the Wild, 18 6/6 avatars can be a really, really powerful combo. Especially remember that with our Essence Wardens for each wolf or avatar that we get, we're going to get to heal 1 per Essence Warden. And remember that when we have Tulsimir on the field, any of our wolves in addition will also net us some life. If we have Triumph of the Hordes on the field when this happens, we can deal some massive infect damage if our opponent isn't expecting it. While technically Heliod, Sun-Crowned, is a enchantment creature, chances are he is not going to be a creature in this deck. We only have 7 white mana symbols total, and if you have less than 5 on your field, he isn't a creature. That being said, if you're able to get enough white devotion, he is an indestructible 5/5 god, so he can be a fairly powerful force, especially if you use Predator's Rapport while he's on the field. More importantly though, Heliod has 2 effects that are useful to us whenever we gain life, which we will be gaining quite a lot of life from this deck. We can put a 1/1 counter on target creature or enchantment we control. If we choose enchantment, he is unfortunately our only option, so that will make him stronger, but if you want, you can bump up your elves to give them some protection, or bump up your wolves/avatars to make them beefier. You can pay 1 colorless and 1 white mana to target another creature, and they gain lifelink until end of turn. As this deck currently stands, we can generate up to 7 white mana in 1 turn, meaning you could potentially give up to 7 creatures lifelink. This will give us another huge method of healing. And the last card in this deck is Aetherflux Reservoir, an artifact that costs 4 mana. Whenever you cast a spell, you gain 1 life for each spell you've cast this turn. This can add up to a lot of health really quickly if you have lots of mana, and as we've seen, we already have plenty of other ways to gain health. So while this first ability isn't the most useful, it is still a nice way to get more life. But what we care more about is that secondary effect, where at the cost of paying 50 life, Aetherflux Reservoir deals 50 damage to target creature or player. Keep in mind, this is used in a 60-card format, meaning most opponents, unless they also have lifelink or healing, will only have about 20 health. You, however, are playing a deck that involves swarming wolves and doing lots and lots of healing. I have had multiple games where I have been able to pay 50 life, leaving me with, say, 10 or 20 life remaining. Meanwhile, my opponent is in the negative 20s or 30s. So this was my Essence of the Night Pack deck. A fun deck with lots of elves and wolves and tons of healing. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I know this deck isn't perfect, and I did make some suggestions for cards you could swap out if you would prefer other options. That being said, the amount of white we have in this deck is actually fairly minimal, and hopefully won't hold you back too far, unless it's your, really sole goal to beat someone specifically with Heliod in this deck. Heliod is good, and I do love him as a card, but he is not your sole method for winning this game. Anyway, if you liked this video, leave a lunar laser like below, hit that starshine subscribe, and hit the moonbeam bell so you can see more content like this. Until next time, I've been Sylvia-Moonbeam. Keep it cool, starshines. See ya.